So, cyberbullying in Nigeria. I mean, has it escalated? I think, how do I put it? It's like the more difficult things become in the country, the harsher people get, the less sensitive people are. We become a lot more self-centered, and, the worst type of cyberbullying is the gaslighting. It's not even the actual bullies that are dragging you. I mean, I've been trolled on social media more times than I can count. But I make jokes about it. I come on TV and I tell you that someone dissed my edges and said it's like rat hair or something. Because it's funny. These people have nothing to insult you with. But not everyone is like that. The worst type of people are those people who are like, man up now. Man up? What do you mean? Small insult, small yabbing. But it's really tough. It is really tough. It took me a long time to get to the point where I could actually laugh at the trolls that would come for me on social media. So at some point, the first time it ever happened to me, I was so distraught. You have no idea. I had a headache. I had a migraine. I was really, really not okay. But with time, I realized that being in the public space, that's like bread and butter. Now, let's talk about what happened after the Nigerian Super Eagles AFCON 2023. I won't call it defeat, I would call it victory, because I still think that every single effort that was put in by every member of that team is worth celebrating. Let's talk about Alex Iwobi, right? I've been very invested in this story. We know that he had to deal with severe, like when I say severe online harassment, blamed unfairly for the team's loss. Imagine the weight of Nigeria. Let's first of all talk about the expectation Nigerians had. The fact that I was going out to watch the Nigerian game. I was sitting down like, yo, pass the ball. I was pointing at my screen. I was yelling at people. I am completely enamored by Nwabali now, and that's someone like me. Now imagine us losing and the whole country heaping that loss on one person's shoulders. Yeah. That's what happened. Now, there were several things he had to deal with. He had to deal with death threats. He had to deal with people reaching out to his family. We've seen interviews circulating online where he didn't want to speak or he didn't look like himself. And you probably ask yourself, oh, why? Why is it like that? Well, because he's dealing with a really tough time, or rather he was dealing with a really tough time through the games. Now, this incident, coupled with similar, treatments of other people like Maduka Okoye in 2021, underscores the dark side of social media during high-profile events, like, for instance, the Headies or the Grammys. Something goes wrong, we decide to knock the person down. Anyway, Nigeria has taken legislative steps to kind of like address the cyberbullying through the Cybercrime Prohibition Prevention Act of 2015. Now, the law defines cyberbullying and then imposes penalties with ongoing efforts to further review in the National Assembly. But how effective has it been so far? And I am now being joined in the studio, from our Lagos studio actually, by a legal practitioner to speak on this, David Oluranti. Thank you so much for joining me on the show. So David, I want us to talk about the reality of this all. I was just talking about how they bullied me too, but I'm a coconut head, but that's not the point. The point is, really, what does it do? Let's talk about the Cybercrime Act. Well, how realistic, like how effective is it? Do I need to go to the police and say, they're bullying me? How do they verify? Like, how does it work exactly?
Thank you very much, Kachi, for having me on the show. And I'm sorry about your experiences on social media. The Cyber Crimes Act, Prevention and Prohibition Act of 2015, defines what cyberbullying is. It actually describes it under the umbrella of cyberstalking in Section 24 of that act. And the aim of the act is to curb criminal behavior that deals with bullying people on the internet space through the use of computer or a network system where you intentionally make comments that are untrue, where you harass, abuse, insult, cause the possibility or the fear of death, threats, bodily harm, kidnapping, both to persons and property. So section 24 in general talks about cyberstalking, which covers all of this, and then it breaks it down into acts against the person and acts against the property and family and all of that. The general intention of the act is to ensure, like you rightly mentioned, that anytime someone goes on social media space or any network space that it involves the use of a network or a computer to make, threats, bully, threaten, harass, or make comments that are not true at a person, then that person can be prosecuted for cyberbullying or cyberstalking. And generally what should happen, like in your case, Kachi, is you should make a formal petition to the Nigerian police, who will then investigate and take it up. Luckily for us, those comments will remain online, and you can always screenshot them and add them to your petition to the police, and then they'll handle it from there.
I'm glad that you mentioned that. I'm intentionally using myself as a case study because, like I would always tell people, you can only speak in something you've experienced. If you haven't really been there, you can't. And I think for Alex, it will be, while he is the subject of this conversation, his experiences could differ from mine. Now, in my case, there were so many people tweeting. In fact, on Twitter, it was a whole trend. And are you telling me now that basically I go on, first of all, considering the fact that they're fake accounts in existence, not everyone tweets with their real account, or deciphering who is behind a particular account is one thing. So you're saying that I screenshot every single insult. My second question would then be, what qualifies as cyberbullying? If somebody says, Kachi, your edges look like a rat ate it, or something, or maybe somebody says, I wish you would die. How do we weigh the kind of comments that would translate to, or is it dependent on how I interpret whatever comment it is?
So the wonderful thing about the law is that it always sets out criteria for how these kinds of things should be interpreted. Like I previously mentioned, within the body of the definition of what cyberbullying is within the Cybercrimes Act of 2015, you can break it down and be able to then find out what the criteria is. So criteria number one is there must be an intention on the part of the person sending the message to you to either cause threat, cause you bodily harm, cause a fear of death, cause you to be afraid for yourself, insults or injury, and including insults to members of your family, threats of kidnapping, as well as your property. So for instance, in a case where somebody says you are mad, that's ordinarily an insult. However, if someone was to go on your page and go on every single post, assuming this was Instagram, or every single Twitter post that you have posted, and then begins to say you are mad, you are mad, you are mad, you are mad, it's beginning to turn into harassment. We do know that emotions can get high. So if we were to go to the Iwobi case, immediately after the game, people got really mad, Nigeria did not win the trophy, and maybe blamed Iwobi. However, there's a level to how much you can say when you're expressing your anger. So when you begin to then say, oh, we'll burn down your house, your father is crazy, you're a bastard, and you repeatedly use those kinds of vulgar and very, very insidious words, then at that point it becomes bullying. I think the only difference between bullying as we know in real life, where it's face-to-face, and bullying that is considered cyberbullying is the medium by which it is communicated. If someone was right in front of you and persistently was calling you stupid, foolish, mad, crazy, or threatening to kidnap you, beat you up, cause you bodily harm, that will be considered bullying. It's the same thing, except that this person is pushing that communication via the internet, the use of a network or a computer system.
Okay, well, David, based on your own analysis, I think that the cybercrime,
yes.
Cyberstalking section 24 needs to be expanded a little. But I'm going to let you, give me your own thoughts about that. What do you think? Do you think Section 24 is broad enough? I don't think it is, but what do you think?
I think part of the larger problem within our society, and we can continue to debate why that problem exists, is our lack of being able to test the veracity of our laws. We have laws that I believe are more than capable of dealing with these kinds of things. Before the advent of social media, for instance, you have defamation and libel laws, and they still exist till today, where if you publish something in the newspaper or wrote something publicly where you then abused, defamed someone, those people could come after you. And there was a criminal element to it too, where you could push for criminal defamation. The same thing exists right now with respect to cyberbullying and cyberstalking. As a matter of fact, the law even pushes further, where it then says that you are liable to getting imprisoned for at least 10 years minimum, or a fine of 25 million, and it can be both, or either or both. So as you can imagine, it's there, but the question is, how many of us, like in Kachi's case, are willing to then test that law and get the police to do the job that they ought to do, investigate these crimes, and then begin to find them? Of course, there's always the difficulty in investigations around identifying people, like you rightly mentioned. Somebody's using a fake account, or an account that is remotely using a VPN or whatever. But again, we've seen in the past and in other jurisdictions outside of Nigeria that it's possible to trace someone even when they use a VPN. It's possible to trace someone even when they try to be remote with their network and all of that. And so I guess, what are then the options for the police? Having adequate tools to be able to do that, number one, being trained properly to understand what they need to in terms of how this is not just banter, but it's now crossed the line. And then we ourselves as, citizens of the good country, testing the laws, ensuring that you put out those petitions, you follow through with the provisions of the law. A good example would have been Tiwa Savage and the popular musician Davido, where she felt threatened and she got her lawyers to, write a proper letter and petition to the IG of police. I don't know how far they've taken that case, and I hope that they've been able to settle their differences. But I mean, that would have been a good and very widely followed case if it was to get to that point.
I completely agree with you. I agree with you on that one. I mean, I have to just say a big thank you, David, because you have provided context to it. But like you rightly said, just like me, when I saw those tweets, I've gotten to the point where I kind of just like brushed them off, and because again, how do you give so much energy to faceless, nameless people? That's just my thoughts. But then, different strokes for different folks. I definitely encourage people out there, if you're feeling like you are being cyberbullied, to go through the right steps and get justice. But I just wouldn't put that much attention to faceless people. Anyway, David, thank you for joining me on Arise 360 today. This is a great conversation.